tuned in to The Andrew Lawton Show.
I've told my story on the show time and time again about how bloated CBC is, about how many people they have doing jobs that even their private sector competitors at CTV and Global do not have, let alone independent media startups like yours truly and True North. But the reason I bring that up is to say that these operations have not done in many ways the work that they've needed to do to downsize and trim down in a sustainable way. Now, again, I don't celebrate people being out of work, but you know what? The folks that run the printing presses are not as valuable as the folks that run the digital for newspapers. So a lot of TV reporters have to shoot their own videos. So there are not a lot of jobs for camera operators compared to what there used to be historically. And at some larger players, they may be. All of this is tragic for individuals, but it is part of an evolution. And when you get government trying to delay the inevitable, it is a recipe for exactly what happened on Friday. So government, I think, has to take its hands off. Now, that means that companies will either sink or swim. I have a hard time believing the doomsday scenario that there is no business model for news. I think the existence of organizations like True North proves there is a business model for news, but you have to be creative, you have to be nimble, and you cannot rely on the state, and you cannot rely on old practices. Now, this is something that I think the government desperately needs to learn as a lesson. We just have a few minutes left in the show here, but we'll bring in our friend Kris Sims from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Kris, I think there's a cautionary tale in all of this that government is delaying the inevitable. And when government gets involved in subsidizing, all of a sudden, it adds a new dimension into business decisions, which is that the government can turn around and point to Bell and say, well, hang on, you don't have the right to do that because we've been giving you money. So this is entirely inevitable in my view.
Yes, you must be shaking your head because I think you and I have had this warning conversation now for the past 5, 6, maybe more years than this. This is what happens when you start relying on the government for your payroll. It's even worse, Andrew, when you have a trade like journalism. We have a calling like journalism. So I know a lot of us who went to journalism school and some of us who didn't, who truly feel journalism is a calling. We want to speak truth to power. We want to comfort the afflicted. We want to find the answers to our W5 questions. Let that show rest in peace. Very sad to see that show go. But then you become beholden to the very thing you're supposed to be holding accountable, the state. And look what's happened. Full disclosure, I worked for CTV for many years. The vast majority of the time, everything went really well. So it's not a sour grapes thing. I'm appealing, though, to my former colleagues, some of whom have lost their jobs, to take a look at this funding structure and realize what has happened in that your mother corporation, has taken money while saying, unless you do this, we're going to cut jobs in news. And they've turned around and done that anyway. 2 weeks after, I don't know if you noted this earlier in your show, Andrew, 2 weeks after Bell Let's Talk, right? What worse thing for mental health happens than losing your job? Very few things. And it used to be a little thing among the newsrooms. It was kind of grim and macabre. But they used to joke among the rank and file workers of, Bell Let's Talk Day's coming up, because they knew that's often when the company would time layoff notices. Right after. I'm not joking. So I've carried that bag out of my drawer at my desk. I've cleaned that out many times, quite often leaving Bell. Again, not fired, but laid off, downturned, furloughed, all those things. And so we're in a massive change right now when it comes to government. Okay, we're seeing the state broadcaster, CBC, coming under heavy fire for taking all this government money and still blowing Canadians' money on bonuses and wastefulness with their CEO. We're seeing more and more mainstream journalists going on government payroll, and we're seeing trust just take a nosedive. People aren't watching, they're not listening, they're tuning out of mainstream media. And here on the other side, hopefully, we're seeing a rebirth. We're seeing a resurgence of independent journalism. That's my hope, is that we can get shows like this becoming viewed more and more often.
Yeah, and look, I mean, one of the things that I would point out here for people is that there is money available in media. You look at the number of people that are making big money on Substack. You look at people that are, I wouldn't say making big money, but people that are able to make a decent living through podcasting and through other work, and it's different. And you know, there are questions that you can raise about the journalistic rigor of all of that. Is, you know, Barry Weiss's Substack to the same standard as Glenn Greenwald's The Intercept, to the same standard as your local paper? And these are questions that consumers, I think, that readers have to adjudicate for themselves. So I think the problem here is that there's been a lot of coasting on legacy credentials that have been taking place, where we are the baseline, we are the benchmark, we are the gold standard. And that, I think there's been a bit of denial there, which has contributed to where we are.
Yes, yes. And it's hard because I've been back and forth. I've done mainstream media. I've done kind of this mix of independent and mainstream, which was Sun News Network, which has given birth to a lot of different new independent shows. And so I've been through that rigmarole, and I've been through the agony of losing your job, having your network shut down, CRTC getting involved, all that stuff happening. And so again, my hope is that both through, okay, here's one thing. I think we need to take a long, hard look at the clubs that are journalists within capital cities. Okay. That includes the Parliamentary Press Gallery, of which I was a member for many years. We need to break up those cool kids clubs because it causes groupthink. Okay. It makes them think that, number one, they all need to say the same thing and ask the same and right questions. And if you don't, you're not a cool kid, okay, because you get peer pressure there. Two, it kind of insulates them from the realities and the storms of what is going on in the rest of the media world. And it makes them start thinking that they don't need to change, and that they don't need to alter their formats, and they don't need to change their command structure. And they do, they clearly do. And that going to government is not going to help them. It's not going to save them. Pierre Poilievre just addressed a lot of this, conservative leader, opposition leader, addressed a lot of this in the last press conference he just did on ArriveCan. And he held forth on the problem of the government handing over millions of dollars to the media, yet the media turning around and axing people's jobs anyway. And this is not CBC. Again, I can't believe we're having this conversation. This is supposedly private media corporations. So I can see all of this kind of coming to a pointy end within the next year or so. I think you're going to see a big shakeup.
Yeah, very well said. We'll have you back on next week, as always. Although it's Family Day in Ontario, so next Monday. So we'll have to. Can we get you on next Tuesday?
I can do Monday or Tuesday. My kids can wait. They're good.
Well, I'm not doing Monday, so
okay.
you're.
All right, I'll see you
you'll be
Tuesday.
here wondering where the show is to introduce you, but we'll figure it out. Kris Sims from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Always a pleasure, Kris. Thanks for coming on.
Likewise. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks for listening to The Andrew Lawton Show. Support the program by donating to True North at www.tnc.news.